Hi, hello, and welcome, or welcome back, I suppose. So, as I've been doing my reading through my shelf this month, not borrowing anything, my goal was to not buy anything as well. But if you saw, not my last video, but the one before, I did say that I was going to be in Manchester and there was a book that I've been eyeing up. And if I do get it, then it will be the one I read after Really Good, actually. And I did end up picking it up. I have been looking at it for a while, and every time I see it, obviously, like, the colour is so gorgeous, it's so, like, poppy, but every time I see it, I'm like, it just seems so interesting. And the book is the DallerGut Dream Department Store by Miye Lee, translated by Sandy Jusun Lee, and let's just have a little blurb reading. In a mysterious town that lies hidden in our collective subconscious, there's a quaint little store where all kinds of dreams are sold. Day and night, visitors, both human and animal, from all over the world, shuffle in sleepily in their pyjamas, lining up to purchase their latest adventure. Each floor in the department store sells a special kind of dream catered for each client. Meet Penny, an enthusiastic new hire, as she navigates the world within the famous DallerGut Dream Department Store along with the other salespeople, led by the flamboyant owner, DallerGut himself. There is never a dull moment thanks to the curious, funny and strange clientele that regularly visit the store. Follow along with Penny as she uncovers the workings of this wonderfully whimsical store. It just seems wonderfully whimsical. And one of those things where, like, I have no idea what to expect when I go into this, but it sounds just divine. And I looked it up to see if I could just borrow it from my library, but I couldn't. And because it has been playing on my mind so much, I'm just like, I get to treat myself. So this is what I'm reading this week, rather than have it sit on my shelf, put it in the tin, because that's what I would usually do. I would pop it onto my shelf, pop the stuff into my tin, if you can hear it, because it's currently what my phone is half rested on. But because I don't have a tripod anymore, because this isn't how I film. And part of that, well, I have something to put my phone in, which is when I've done like art on my table, how I use it with that. But it's just, this is easier given that this is the only time I'm really filming my face. So yeah, I am really looking forward to reading this. And I hope you enjoy this little journey with me. I had pretty high hopes for this book, even if I didn't really know what to expect, and spoiler alert, I couldn't have asked for anything better. Though, when it comes to spoilers, I will try to keep this spoiler free. I'll let you know if anything comes up, though. Maybe the jet ski bear will make an appearance. Also, if I sound really lazily in this video and the next, I will put another disclaimer, I guess, in the beginning. I'm kind of groggy at the minute. I don't know if it's an allergy thing or if I'm actually sick, who knows, but the show must go on, I guess. Bobbed hair all soggy and puffy, wearing a comfortable shirt, Penny is sitting on the second floor of her favourite cafe. It's a nice, gentle opener, easing us into the book. The tone is set with that. This book is definitely easy reading, and it lets us know that this book is pretty grounded despite the unusual setting, and that's true for the whole prologue. I thought this would be far more of an absurd book, but like I say, it's actually incredibly grounded. And also, here in this early part, and actually throughout the rest of the book, the exposition is handled really nicely. It sort of comes in two forms. Early on, it's that nicely struck balance of, these people live here, so they don't need to learn new things, but we do. It's something pretty common for fresh authors, especially in sci-fi and fantasy, to do that sort of over-explaining early on and have characters explain things and ask questions they wouldn't need to if they lived there. But Lee does it, she does it brilliantly, and it all feels really natural, even when Penny, our lead's friend, is a big animal creature who definitely feels like furries would love. And through the rest of the book, we learn with Penny, a sort of genre classic. The first thing that comes to mind is something like Doctor Who. The companions serve as a fill-in for the audience members, there to ask questions about wild situations we could never expect to find ourselves in. And that's what Penny does here. She's a fresh employee at the DallerGut Dream Department Store when we begin the story. Well, when we very first see her, she is prepping for an interview and she's hired very early on. So, while she has some knowledge of what goes on there, it's sort of like I wouldn't know the intricacies of working in any given company without having worked there myself, but I could walk in and buy things, that kind of thing. So she sort of knows what goes on there, but we learn the intricacies alongside her, and it is all done really naturally. I loved learning the lore of this place as I went through, and it was also spaced out really nicely. This isn't the longest book in the world, but the pacing is still really steady. It's really easy to lose yourself in it and read for far longer than you'd planned, and that's really helped by the fact that you're not bombarded with information about the world building. It's really clear that Miye Lee put a huge amount of work into the mechanics of this world, and we're probably not aware of just how much has gone into making this world feel as truly dynamic as it does. It's so damn impressive. Like, as much as I love sci-fi, and fantasy suffers with this too, an abundance of information about the world can be just incredibly overwhelming, and it can be hard to know what I'm supposed to remember, but everything feels so easy to work with here. I never felt like I was getting a history lesson where I would be tested on it later on, which isn't uncommon for me with, like I say, with sci-fi, with fantasy. The one time we get a sort of bigger load of exposition at once is a very short story about the history of the place they live in. It's a story told often to children, and Penny is told that she should probably reread it before her interview, because it means a lot to DallerGut, as he has a direct connection to one of the subjects of the tale. And we are learning as Penny is recalling. We're still getting information alongside her, and it doesn't feel too much like it's an exposition dump. For one, it's just a fun short story, really capturing the way that those legends are told, where it isn't always clear just how much truth there is in them, but they're told like they're a part of history. I remember as a kid reading about ancient Greek myths and legends, and having that feeling of never quite being able to tell whether there was truth in it. A little less so with the idea of any of the sort of monsters and things like that, but stories of Troy or Achilles come to mind. Maybe there is some truth in it, maybe there isn't, but Lee really captures the way these tales are told in this short story that Penny's reading. And given the nature of the world we're in with this book, I'm certainly inclined to believe that this is actually the history of the place. And when Lee does call back to this story, you're not expected to remember tiny little details about it. It's the broader strokes, but it's still not necessarily in your face. We're told explicitly about two people related to this story, and while I don't recall if the third is as explicitly called upon, I'm pretty sure he isn't, but if you give it a bit of thought, then you can certainly put the pieces together. And when it comes to her world building, it's just like, even the way she uses things like nightmares in this world is so damn effective. Dreams provide the currency in this place. So it's a case of who would opt in for buying nightmares. Well, Lee still has an answer to this, and obviously I'll let you read to find out the details on that, but again, it's just the sense of clarity that Lee has obviously spent so much time putting her world together. There's so much attention to detail here, and it really fills my heart with joy. There's a really good mix of showing and telling here, and it works so well, given that this is pretty easy reading. I would probably say it's suitable for most audiences. I don't recall any explicit language, and the text itself isn't overly complex. It's one of those where when you're younger, you might not be able to read into certain things quite as much, or there might be certain things that might not quite make as much sense, but as an adult you can read into it more, and you can pass things that maybe you couldn't do as a younger reader. This is also a book that indirectly called me out for being incredibly cynical. In my defense, this is a book set in the world of retail, and I am marred by living in a capitalist landscape. But throughout, I had my expectations turned on their head. Like, for example, early on, I was like, oh no, red flag, she's been hired directly after her interview. And yet, Penny ends up loving her job. Which, by the way, if you are at a job interview in the real world and you are immediately offered the job on the day of the interview, like you finish your interview and you were like, do you want to come work with us? Say no, actually. Or tell them that you want to have some time to think about it and then say no. But this place just seems like the most ideal place to be honest. It was often, like with my cynicism, it was often the same with DallerGut, the man who runs the department store. He's kind-hearted and gentle, but in the back of my big old cynical head, I kept expecting there to be something behind it, for it all to just be one big front, but I genuinely don't think that's the case by the end. I kept on thinking the worst of him, expecting that idea of a big nasty capitalist to just burst out at any minute, but I just think he wants the best for his customers, and I'm not often... It's sort of one of those things where I try to see the best in characters, and at the same time I'm kind of cynical, but in this case, like, my cynicism was, absolutely, well, it was turned on its head, because it all feels very intentional, some of it being more obvious in places than others, and like, there are characters that so easily could have been malevolent, but Lee made them so gentle and so kind. A character like Maxim is so warm despite what he could so easily be. I half expected him to fill a kind of villainous role, but again, Lee works at subverting certain expectations, and it's all done in a pretty understated way. Like I said earlier, this book is remarkably grounded for something based around selling literal dreams to people as they've fallen asleep. And honestly, all of her characters are so vibrant, even the more sedate among the cast. I can't help but love them all. Even the slightly more annoying of the managers, because they're all just so, like, man, they just warm my heart so much. And sure, Penny is one of the people that is a little less vibrant, but she still has character to her. She's not a complete blank slate, even though she is we're alongside her learning the intricacies of this place. She's curious. She often speaks a little impulsively, and she really wants to impress the people around her. She wants to be liked, and yeah, don't we all? Again, I know I've said it before, but this book is so much more grounded than I expected, and the characters are vibrant in the most normal of ways. One of them gets MILF tokened, for God's sakes, caught up in a kind of pump and dump scheme. Maybe pump and dump scheme isn't the right way of putting it, but it was just like a similar kind of idea. It's the most normal book in the most unusual place. I want to be here with these people. This whole world feels like an ideal, and it's a dream world after all, but this is a place to lose yourself in, and while I know I won't remember, I like the idea that when I head to bed tonight, I'll find myself buying a dream that'll see me through the night. I have seen that there's a sequel set to come out. I'm not sure when, but I have a feeling that I'm probably going to pre-order, because this was just absolutely delightful, and I need to head back to this world again. It's pretty low stakes and just left me feeling warm and cozy afterwards. I'll 100% be back to this book in the future, and I think it's right that this would be a book to read before going to bed. Though, before I wrap up, I do want to give thanks to Sandy Jusun Lee, who translated this book from Korean. I loved her translator's note at the end. She describes it as a love letter to the book, and that's very evident in the way she describes her work. I think it's fantastic to see the sheer amount of love that she puts into her craft, making sure that she could recreate and convey the feeling that she had when she read the original Korean. I love that it's clear that she's doing this because she loves the work she's translating, and I think it's cool to see some of her decision-making process. And I'm pretty sure that I saw she's the translator for the sequel, and I'm really happy about that because she did such a brilliant job with this. Do let me know what you're reading at the minute, or tell me something that you've read that fills you with that sense of warmth and coziness, because I always need more like this in my life. Also, feel free to like, feel free to subscribe, feel free to put your notifications on, and all that other cringe shit I'm supposed to ask you to do in my videos. But most importantly, I hope you have a wonderful day, a wonderful night, a wonderful whenever you are watching this. Take good care of yourself. Right.